The kettle was still warm when my grandson tugged on my sleeve and asked me a question I haven't been able to forget. I'd driven up to my son's place in Burlington that Saturday afternoon, a 4-hour haul from where I live outside Albany. My daughter-in-law had passed 2 years back from a stroke, sudden and brutal, and my son Caleb had remarried fast. Too fast if you'd asked me, but nobody did. The new wife seemed pleasant enough at the holidays. Polite, brought a casserole, laughed at the right moments. I'd been a hospital pharmacist for 37 years before I retired, and I'd learned a long time ago that pleasant doesn't mean safe. But what was I going to say? My son was a grown man. I'd come up because my grandson was turning 8. His name is Theo, and he is the reason my chest still feels too tight when I think about that weekend. The plan was simple. Drop off the gift, a wooden chess set I'd ordered from a small shop in Maine, stay for cake, drive home Sunday morning. I parked on the street because the driveway was full of cars I didn't recognize. Caleb opened the door looking tired in a way I hadn't seen before, hollow under the eyes, slow to smile. He hugged me, took my coat, said the party had wrapped up an hour ago and I'd missed it. I hadn't missed it. I'd been told 4 o'clock. He'd told me 4 o'clock. But I let it slide because my grandson came running down the hall in his socks and slammed into my legs, and that was all I cared about. He looked thinner. I want to be careful here because hindsight rearranges everything. You see what you want to see. But I'm telling you, the boy I picked up that afternoon was lighter than the boy I'd held at Christmas. His cheeks had lost something. There was a softness to his eyes that didn't belong to a healthy 8-year-old. He laughed when he saw the chess set, and the laugh was real, but it ended too quickly, like he ran out of breath halfway through. His stepmother came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was about 35, blonde, pretty in a careful way. She greeted me with that bright, scrubbed voice some people use on their in-laws. She told me Theo had been fighting something for a few weeks now. Stomach trouble. Dizzy spells. She said they'd seen the pediatrician twice already and were going to a specialist in Boston next month. She said it all in one practiced breath. And I noticed, because I'd spent decades listening to people explain medications to me at the counter, that she didn't quite look at me when she said it. She looked at the towel. I told her I was sorry to hear it. I asked Theo if he wanted to play a game of chess before dinner. He nodded hard. We set up at the dining room table. He knew the basic moves. His grandmother, my late wife Patricia, had taught him knight and bishop the summer before she passed. He still remembered. We played a slow, sloppy game while Caleb made spaghetti in the kitchen, and his stepmother set the table around us, lifting our pieces to slide placemats underneath. I was watching the boy more than the board. He moved a pawn, then forgot which side he was. He laughed about it. Then he yawned. Then he yawned again. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. At dinner, he barely ate. His stepmother poured him a glass of apple juice from a green plastic pitcher she kept on the counter. Just his glass. The rest of us drank water and wine. I watched her pour it. I watched him drink it. He drank the whole thing. Within 20 minutes, he was leaning his head against my arm. Caleb said, "He's been like this. The doctor thinks it might be his thyroid." I didn't say anything. I just rubbed Theo's shoulder while he half-dozed against me. After dinner, I carried him upstairs. He weighed less than he should have. I tucked him in, and as I bent down to kiss his forehead, he opened his eyes and grabbed the front of my flannel shirt with both hands. He pulled me close. His breath smelled like apple juice and toothpaste. He said, "Grandpa, can you ask her to stop putting the medicine in my drinks? It makes me feel funny." I want you to understand something. I've been around children my whole adult life. My own 3. 6 grandchildren now. Plus, all the kids who came through the pharmacy with their parents over the years. Kids exaggerate. Kids make things up. Kids confuse what's real with what's on television. I know that. But I also know what a kid sounds like when he's been carrying something too heavy for too long and he finally finds someone he thinks might believe him. I kept my voice steady. I asked him what he meant. He told me his stepmother put a spoon in his juice in the mornings and drops in his juice at night. Sometimes in his milk, sometimes in his cocoa. He said it tasted kind of like nothing but a little bit like batteries. He said it made him sleepy, and his head felt like it was full of cotton, and his stomach hurt the next day. He said when he told his dad said it was just his vitamins. He said it didn't feel like vitamins. I asked him how long this had been going on. He thought about it. He said, since the leaves changed. That would have been 6, 7 weeks. I told him I loved him. I told him I would handle it. I told him not to drink anything she gave him tonight and to come find me if he needed water, and I would get it from the tap myself. He nodded against the pillow and closed his eyes, and inside about 90 seconds he was out cold, deeper than any tired 8-year-old should be after one glass of juice with dinner. I sat on the edge of his bed for a long time. Then I went down to the kitchen. The pitcher was still on the counter. I rinsed out my coffee cup from the morning, the one I'd left in the guest room, dried it with a paper towel, and poured maybe 2 ounces of the apple juice into it. I capped it with cling wrap. I put the cup in my overnight bag, deep down between my socks. My hands were shaking, and I'm not a man whose hands shake. She came in while I was zipping the bag closed in the front hall. She asked if I was leaving early. I told her I'd just remembered I'd left a prescription of mine in the car and didn't want it to freeze overnight. She smiled and said the temperature was supposed to drop. I smiled back. I went out to my car. I sat in the driver's seat with the heater off and my hands on the wheel, and I tried to think. Going to my son right then was the obvious move, but I have known my son for 41 years, and I know how he gets when he's defending the woman he's chosen. He had defended his first wife against my own concerns more than once when I'd been in the wrong, and the memory of being wrong made him quicker to dismiss me now. If I walked back inside and accused his wife of poisoning his child based on a 30-second whisper from an 8-year-old, I would lose. He would tell her. She would have all night to clean that pitcher, scrub the cabinets, flush whatever was in the house. The boy would be alone with her tomorrow while I drove home. I went back inside. I told them I had a headache and was going to turn in. I went upstairs. I locked the guest room door. I lay on top of the covers fully dressed and watched the ceiling fan turn until almost 3 in the morning, and at some point I must have slept, because when I opened my eyes there was gray light at the curtains and my phone said 5:40. I wrote a note for my son. I said I'd remembered an early appointment and was sorry to slip out. Would call him from the road, kiss the boy for me. I left it on the kitchen table. I left the chess set where I'd unwrapped it the night before. I drove 3 blocks, pulled over at a 24-hour gas station, and called my younger brother. My brother is a small-town family doctor. He's 72 and still working 2 days a week because he says retirement bores him. I told him what had happened. I told him I had 2 ounces of suspicious apple juice and a coffee cup in my passenger seat. I asked him what to do. He said, "You bring that here. You bring that boy here. Today." I said I couldn't kidnap my own grandson out of his father's house. He said, "Then you call your son right now, and you tell him exactly what the boy said, word for word, and you tell him you're driving back to his house at noon, and the 3 of you are bringing the boy and the juice to a doctor today. No arguing, or you are calling the state." I sat with that. The sky behind the gas station was turning a pale, cold pink. I thought about Theo's hands on my shirt. I thought about the way the boy had looked at me, expecting, maybe, that one more grown-up would tell him he was imagining things. I called my son. I want to tell you he believed me right away. He didn't. He was furious. He told me I was overreacting. that an 8-year-old was confused, that his wife was a saint who had stepped into a grieving household and held it together. He said his thyroid theory was supported by lab work. He said he'd take the boy to Boston next month, and we'd all feel foolish. I let him talk. When he was done, I said, "Caleb, I poured some of the juice into a cup last night. I'm taking it to your uncle today. Either you bring Theo and meet me there, or I am calling Child Protective Services from the parking lot. I love you. I love that boy more than my own breath. This is not negotiable." The line was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Where?" I drove the 4 hours home to Albany. My brother had already cleared his schedule. My son drove down from Burlington with Theo, just the two of them, and met us at the office at 1 in the afternoon. He had told his wife he was taking the boy to a Saturday matinee in Montpelier. He said it was the first time he'd lied to her, and his voice when he told me that was the voice of a man who already knew. My brother examined Theo. He was gentle and easy with him, the way good country doctors are. He sent the juice sample to a lab he'd worked with for 30 years, with a personal phone call and a request to put it ahead of the queue. He drew blood from Theo, with my grandson sitting on my lap and squeezing my fingers white. Then we waited. Caleb and I sat in the parking lot in his truck with the heater running. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he started talking. He told me she had taken over the medications in the house. She had put a pill organizer on the counter for Theo with 7 days of supplements she said the pediatrician had recommended. She'd filled it herself. She'd been the one bringing him to appointments, the one explaining symptoms to the doctor, the one updating the school. Caleb worked 60-hour weeks at an engineering firm and had let her run the household side because, he said, she'd seemed so glad to do it. He said she'd been talking about having Theo evaluated for chronic fatigue and metabolic disorder. She'd started a fund online. He hadn't paid much attention. The donations weren't huge, a few $1,000s, but they'd been climbing. There was a story on a fundraising page. She'd written it. He'd signed off without reading it carefully. He put his head down on the steering wheel. I let him be. It was almost 5 in the evening when my brother came out to the truck. He tapped on the window. His face was the face of a man who had seen too much in his career and had hoped not to see it again. He said, "It's clonidine, and there's a benzodiazepine. The juice has both. The boy's blood has both. They'd been in his system for weeks. Clonidine is a blood pressure medication. In a child his size, in the dose she'd been using, it would slow his heart, drop his blood pressure, make him groggy, make him gain weight unevenly, make him sleep too much, make him look exactly like a sick boy with a mystery illness." The benzodiazepine was a sedative, together, in the wrong child. On the wrong day, they could have killed him. My brother said the boy's potassium was off. His liver values were off. He had been 6, maybe 8 weeks from real organ damage. My son made a sound I hope to never hear again. I drove. My brother stayed with Theo at the office while we went to the police. Caleb gave a statement. I gave a statement. The detective who took it was a woman about 50 with a son of her own. She listened the way professionals listen when they already understand. She made calls. By 8 that evening, an officer in Burlington was at my son's house with a warrant. They found clonidine in a labeled prescription bottle and the stepmother's name, written by a doctor in another state who had given her a 30-day supply for anxiety-related hypertension. They found the benzodiazepine in her purse, also her own prescription, also from the out-of-state doctor. They found the green pitcher. The crime lab matched the residue. They found something else, too. They found her laptop. On it was a folder with screenshots of the fundraising page, donation totals, a draft of a future post titled "His Worst Week Yet" with placeholder text where the symptoms would go. She had a spreadsheet. She had been tracking it, There were photographs of Theo asleep on the couch, taken from above, that she had apparently been planning to use. This was the part that broke me. Not the drugs, not even the spreadsheet. It was the photographs. A grown woman standing over a sleeping child she was poisoning, holding her phone up to take pictures of him for money. She was arrested at her sister's house in Plattsburgh 2 days later. She had run. The case was thorough because the evidence was thorough. There was no plea bargain offered, because the district attorney up there had recently lost an election partly over a soft plea deal in another child case. And she had told my son's lawyer privately that this one was going to trial unless the defense begged. The defense begged. The DA didn't budge. My grandson's stepmother was charged with aggravated child abuse, multiple counts of assault on a child under 12, fraud, and reckless endangerment. The trial was 11 months later after I'd already had my second hip replacement. I sat in the courtroom every day. Caleb sat next to me. Theo did not testify. The DA had recorded his interview with a forensic child specialist months earlier, and that recording of my grandson sitting in a small chair in a small room saying in his small voice, "She put the medicine in my drinks and it made me feel funny," was played to the jury on a Tuesday afternoon. I watched 2 of the jurors cry. I cried too. My son did not cry. He sat with his jaw locked and his hands flat on his knees, and he stared at the woman he had married. And I have never seen anything colder than my own son's face that afternoon. She was convicted on all counts. The judge gave her 12 years on the abuse counts to be served consecutively with the fraud sentence. With the way the math worked out and the state she was sentenced in, she will serve at least 9 before she sees a parole board. The judge, who was a grandfather himself, said from the bench that what had been done to that child was one of the most calculated cases of betrayal he had seen in his career, and that the court rejected the defense's framing of mental illness, because the spreadsheet and the fundraising scheme demonstrated planning, profit motive, and a clear understanding of consequence. Caleb filed for an annulment, which was granted on the grounds of fraud, and full custody was never in question. His ex-wife is barred from contact for the duration of her sentence and a long stretch after. Theo has not seen her since the night I carried him upstairs. I want to tell you about the part that came after, because the comments I sometimes read on stories like this complain when the storyteller doesn't say what happened to the child. And that's the part that matters, isn't it? Theo spent 2 weeks in the hospital after that first appointment with my brother. They flushed the drugs from his system, they monitored his heart and his liver. He gained 4 pounds on hospital food, which tells you everything you need to know. When he came home with me and Caleb to my house in Albany, because Caleb didn't want him in the Burlington house for a while, and frankly, neither did I. He stayed for almost a year. He started 3rd grade at the elementary school down my street. I drove him every morning. We ate breakfast together at my kitchen table, and on the second morning he asked me if he could pour his own juice from the carton himself. And I said of course, and he poured it, and he watched the glass for a long time before he drank it. He doesn't do that anymore. It took about 6 months. He sees a child psychologist every other Wednesday. He has nightmares less than he used to. He started playing chess in a Saturday club at the public library. He is 11 now. He is tall for his age, and his cheeks have come back, and his laugh goes all the way through. About 4 months after Theo came to live with me, my son drove down one weekend with a small carrier in the back seat. It was a kitten from a shelter outside Burlington. A scrap of a thing, gray and white, about 8 weeks old. Theo named her Pepper. Pepper sleeps on his pillow every night and follows him around the house like a dog. The first night she was with us, Theo brought her into my room at 2 in the morning because she was crying, and the 3 of us slept in my bed. An old man and a small boy and a smaller cat, and I lay there in the dark, listening to my grandson breathe normally for the first time in I don't know how long. And I thought about the version of this story where I hadn't gone to that birthday weekend. where he hadn't whispered, where I hadn't believed him. I think about that version of the story more than I should. I want to say a few things plainly because I'm an old man and I don't have time to dance around them. The first thing is this. If a child tells you something is wrong, you believe the child. You don't have to believe every detail. You don't have to act like a detective. But you take it seriously enough to ask one more question, and then one more after that, and you do not let an adult in the room tell you to drop it. Children very rarely invent the specific. Theo didn't say, "Mom is poisoning me," which is what an adult would say. He said, "She puts a spoon in my juice in the mornings and drops in my juice at night, and it tastes a little like batteries." That is not a lie. No 8-year-old makes up batteries. The second thing is this. Watch the household, not the diagnosis. When a child gets sick and stays sick, and the symptoms keep changing, and only one adult is administering the care, and that adult is fluent in medical language they shouldn't be fluent in, and donations are coming in, you are looking at something you need to look at harder. It is rare, but it happens. It happened to us. The third thing is this. Save the evidence. I poured 2 ounces of apple juice into a coffee cup at a kitchen counter at 9 o'clock at night because I had a feeling I couldn't name. That cup convicted her. If I had waited until morning to think it through, that cup would have been washed. The last thing is this. Go to your son, or your daughter, or your sister, or whoever the parent is. Not first. First, you protect the child. But after the child is safe, you go to the parent, and you do not gloat, and you do not blame, because they were lied to too, and they will spend the rest of their life replaying the moments they didn't see it. My son is a good father who married a monster. He didn't know. The hardest year of his life was not the year of the trial. It was the year after, when he had to look at his own son across the dinner table and forgive himself for not noticing sooner. I love him. I told him every week, sometimes every day, that the not noticing was hers, not his. He's getting there. Theo is in the kitchen right now as I'm telling you this. He's at my house for the weekend. He's making cocoa, the kind from the tin, the kind I used to make for his father when he was small. He's 11 and a half, and he's getting his height fast. He's pouring it himself. He's not watching the cup. That's the whole story. If you take one thing from it, take this. The smallest voice in the room is sometimes saying the loudest truth. Lean down. Listen close. Believe what you hear. And if your gut tells you something is wrong in a house you love, do not drive away from that house without doing something about it. You can apologize for being wrong. You cannot apologize to a child who didn't make it because the grown-ups in his life decided it was easier not to look. Ask the question, pour the juice into the cup, make the call. I've thought about that weekend more times than I can count, and the thing I keep coming back to is how close we came to a different ending. Not because of fate, not because of luck, but because of small choices made in small moments. My grandson chose to whisper. I chose to listen. I chose to pour 2 ounces of apple juice into a coffee cup at 9 o'clock at night instead of telling myself I was being a paranoid old man. My brother chose to clear his schedule. My son, after a hard hour on the phone, chose to believe me over the woman sleeping in his bed. Every one of those choices was a hinge. Pull any of them out, and Theo doesn't make it. That's the part I want any grandparent or parent watching this to understand. Cause and effect doesn't always look big. Sometimes it looks like a coffee cup wrapped in cling wrap and zipped into a duffel bag. Sometimes it looks like an old man driving 4 hours home with his hands shaking on the wheel because he couldn't sleep until that juice was out of the house. The world turns on those small, deliberate acts. I learned 3 things in that year, and I'd give them to you if I could hand them across the kitchen table. The first is about character. The woman my son married was charming, organized, and good with casseroles. None of that is character. Character is what someone does when no one is watching, and she was poisoning a child for spreadsheet money when she thought no one was watching. Don't be fooled by polish. Watch what people do with the small power they have over the people who can't fight back. That tells you everything. The second is about the mind. I spent 37 years behind a pharmacy counter, and I almost talked myself out of what I was seeing because the alternative was too ugly to face. The mind wants comfort. It wants to believe the daughter-in-law is just tired, the boy is just going through a phase, the symptoms are just a thyroid. Train yourself to ask the harder question especially when, asking it makes you the difficult one in the room. Knowledge is only useful if you let yourself use it on the people you love. The third is about backbone. Believing Theo was the easy part. Driving back to that gas station at 5 in the morning and calling my son and telling him I would phone the state if he didn't meet me at noon. That was the hard part. There comes a moment in almost every story like this where the right thing to do will cost you something. Your son's anger, a holiday season, a relationship you spent years building. Pay it. Pay it without flinching. The boy in the upstairs bedroom is not negotiating with you. He is counting on you. Be accountable. Theo is in the next room making cocoa. He is 11 and a half, and his laugh goes all the way through. That's because 3 old men and 1 stubborn little boy made the right small choices on the right small day. Make yours.